In my previous life, I took my own life to avoid being touched by the lecherous emperor. My husband, Yu, was devastated by my death and rebelled, killing the emperor. After ascending the throne, he found a dancer whose features resembled mine and pampered her. The world called Yu infatuated, but no one knew that he actually loved that dancer. As for me, I was offered to the emperor by him as a means to later justify his rebellion. When I was reborn, I returned to the night I served the emperor. This time, I took the initiative to wrap my arms around his slender waist. The next day, the whole capital knew. The emperor was wise and mighty, but Yu was not capable. I drifted as a soul for years, and finally returned to my body. I looked around at the bright yellow curtains and felt the coolness of the clothes on my body. It all seemed strangely familiar. Wasn't it here that I took my own life? Just then, a voice came from outside the door. His Majesty has arrived. The door opened, and a slender figure stepped in. In the dim candlelight, his gaze was deep, bottomless, and fixed on me. It felt like I was the prey in a trap, with an unmistakable desire in his eyes. In my previous life, I had fallen into despair under that gaze, and without a second thought, I pulled out my hairpin and plunged it into my throat. But this time, before Emperor Li Sun could speak, I rushed forward. I wrapped my arms around his slim waist. Your Majesty, you've finally arrived. This humble woman has been waiting anxiously. The person I held clearly froze, his muscles tensing. After a long silence, a soft laugh came from above my head. What is this, Yu's consort? What do you mean? Isn't this a question with an obvious answer? Who doesn't know that this emperor has always been lustful and has subtly inquired about me several times? And my husband, Yu Li, found an opportunity to present me to the emperor. Unfortunately, in my previous life, I was kept in the dark and ended up taking my own life, conveniently giving Li an excuse to rebel. Now that I had lived again, I'd rather cling to the emperor and trample Li underfoot. Thinking this, I forced a shy smile. I have admired your Majesty for a long time. Today, to finally be by your side, I cannot help myself. I wasn't sure if I overdid it, but the man before me not only didn't respond with emotion but also wiped the smile from his face. His long fingers lifted my chin, and his gaze was cold and probing. They say Yu and his consort share deep affection. How could you admire me? I saw your Majesty several times at the palace banquet and was captivated by your heroic appearance. I could not forget it. To serve you, I could not wish for more. I gazed deeply, my eyes full of emotion. He simply smiled without giving a direct answer. They say Yu has the appearance of an immortal, the dream of countless women. With such a husband, how could his consort admire anyone else? That was not untrue. Li did have good looks, always warm and refined, with a natural charm in every gesture. On the other hand, Emperor Li Sun was pale, with a soft and cold look in his eyes, his entire presence exuding an eerie chill. It was obvious who would attract more women when the two were compared. Seeing me caught off guard, Li Sun gave a cold smile. The icy glare in his eyes made me shudder. I gritted my teeth, stood on tiptoe, and whispered in his ear, Your Majesty, to be honest, Yu is not capable. I've been married to him for over a year, and not once have I been satisfied. With a burst of laughter, I was suddenly lifted into his arms. His gaze was so bright it felt almost blinding, and his voice was drenched in allure. So that's how it is. Tonight, I'll make sure you know what it means to be satisfied. The whole night, the sheets were tossed in a storm of passion. Li Sun, pale, thin, and reserved, turned out to be quite the master in bed. He employed countless techniques, exhausting me to the point where my body felt completely limp. As the sky lightened, he held me in his arms, grinding against me as he asked, Are you satisfied now? I hoarsely murmured, He chuckled, the small mole at the corner of his eye faintly reddening. The emperor didn't attend the morning court, and the ministers were gossiping. They all said that he had forcefully taken his sister-in-law, Yu's consort, and that it was a blatant disregard for family ethics. Li Zhan waited the whole morning but didn't hear any news of my death. In the end, he couldn't hold back and came to the palace to see me. He thought I had already died, but the emperor, for the sake of his dignity, had hidden the news of my death. So, when he entered the palace, he burst into tears, heartbroken, and called out my name in despair. But to his shock, when he entered the palace, he saw me, dressed in fine clothes, smiling brightly, leaning against the emperor's chest. And Emperor Li Sun, who was usually cold and gloomy, was smiling warmly, his eyes full of tenderness as he gazed at me. Li Zhan's sorrow on his face froze in an instant. The jade hairpin on his head sparkled brightly. "Your Majesty, you too." I was still alive, yet why did he look at me as if he had seen a ghost? Li Sun's hand, which was wrapped around my waist, tightened slightly, and he casually glanced at the person kneeling on the floor. "Duke Yu, are you here to take the consort back?" Li Zhan was still in a daze, his lips trembling, unable to answer. He had indeed come to take me, but he had expected my corpse, not this enormous green hat. Seeing that he wasn't answering, Li Sun leaned in close to my ear. "Qing, do you want to go back?" Last night, I couldn't resist him and tearfully told him my maiden name was Song Yueqing. Since then, he had been calling me Qing nonstop. I looked around at the palace maids and eunuchs who were serving us, cleared my throat, and said aloud, "I have been married to Duke Yu for more than a year, yet it was only last night that I learned what true happiness is. I want to divorce Duke Yu and serve His Majesty in the palace." The emperor smiled. "Duke Yu." The palace maids and eunuchs widened their eyes, burning with the fire of gossip. Li Zhan had been deliberately creating a reputation for being a faithful man, with no other concubines in his household. But today, with my words as evidence, it was now a confirmed fact. Indeed, within 3 days, the entire capital knew. The emperor was wise and mighty. As for Duke Yu, he was not capable. When Li Sun heard the news, he was holding me in his arms on the dragon bed, indulging in passion. In contrast, Li Zhan had always kept things strictly businesslike in bed, never showing any signs of desire. Unlike now with Li Sun, who was so greedy for pleasure, it seemed like he couldn't get enough, wanting to entwine with me every night and consume me entirely. I truly couldn't keep up. I had gently reminded him once that the harem should be fairly treated, with equal attention for all. His face, which had been filled with passion just moments ago, instantly darkened. He bit down on my bare shoulder. "Do you want me to leave?" I was so frightened that tears immediately streamed down my face, and I quickly shook my head. "I can't live without your Majesty. I wish I could be with you every day." "That's better." He kissed me gently again, the mole at the corner of his eye glowing a deep red. Trying to act virtuous didn't work, so I decided to discuss more serious matters with him. I wanted him to be on guard against Duke Yu's wolfish ambitions. But as soon as I finished speaking, he grabbed my neck. "You are not allowed to mention other men in my bed." I trembled in fear, and after trying to please him for a long time, he finally calmed down. Truly, being with the emperor is like being with a tiger. Li Sun was so unpredictable. When he loved me, he was full of tenderness, but he could flip the switch and turn cold at any moment. It made me live in constant fear. As the winter solstice approached, the palace held its usual banquet, inviting all the ministers to a grand feast. Li Sun, for some reason, insisted on bringing me along, and even allowed me to sit beside him on the dragon throne. What was supposed to be a lively banquet fell into complete silence as soon as everyone saw me. Li Zhan was also there, looking utterly dejected and filled with sorrow. But this time, no one praised him for his deep and unchanging love. Instead, everyone looked at him with pity, as if saying, "Prince, although we know you're incapable, life is long, and you must stay strong." I mimicked the style of a favored concubine, delicately leaning on Li Sun's chest. From time to time, I fed him wine and food. He seemed to enjoy it, his gaze on me full of intoxication and allure. At that moment, music began to play, and a dozen dancers took the stage, gracefully performing. Among them, the one leading the dance looked very familiar. I looked closely and was shocked. Wasn't that Li Zhen's true love, Lu Ying? Li Zhen had hidden her well. Only after becoming emperor did he make her his queen and continue to dote on her. Outsiders believed Lu Ying had risen to prominence because she resembled me, but little did they know I was the one being used as a substitute. What was going on this time, though? Why was she allowed to dance so openly at a palace banquet? I hesitated in my thoughts and glanced at Li Zhen. I saw him gazing at Lu Ying, his eyes filled with obsession. Just then, a cool hand grabbed my chin. "Ching Ching, what are you looking at?" Li Sun's voice was gentle, but his eyes were cold. I quickly turned away and smiled coquettishly. I was just admiring this new song and dance. I couldn't help but watch. His fingers tightened around my chin, turning my head back to face him. I met his narrow eyes. "Ching Ching is mine. Your eyes should only be for me." I couldn't help but shiver. I immediately wrapped my arms around his waist and nuzzled my head against his chest. "My heart and eyes only have room for your majesty." Over the time we spent together, I had figured out his preferences. Whenever I acted sweet and obedient like this, I could always make him happy. This time was no exception. He said nothing, simply stroking my hair while focusing on the song and dance. Once the performance ended, the dancers curtsied. Suddenly, Li Zhen stood up, kneeling in the center of the hall, and spoke loudly. "I beg your majesty to grant me that dancer." At this, everyone immediately turned their gaze toward Lu Ying. Several perceptive people had already noticed the resemblance between her and me. Q really is devoted. Even though he's been rejected, he still can't forget her, wanting to find a replacement. Although Q isn't capable, Song Yueqing is too heartless. As the murmurs spread, Li Zhen bowed again, his voice filled with sorrow. "I truly cannot forget you, Song Yueqing. I beg your majesty to show mercy and grant that dancer to me." Li Sun, sitting on the dragon throne, gave a faint smile, his expression unreadable. But I was filled with indignation inside. So, this was Li Zhen's plan. He couldn't resist wanting to be with his true love, but he still wanted to use me as a cover. Well, I wouldn't let him have his way. "Your Majesty," I smiled. "Doesn't that dancer look a bit like me?" Li Sun glanced between the two of us with interest and nodded. "She does resemble you a little. Since we look alike, it must be fate. Why not invite her into the palace to be my companion?" "No." Before Li Sun could say anything, Lu Ying cried out in surprise. She knelt on the ground, her fragile shoulders trembling slightly. "I am of low status, not worthy of entering the palace." I stood up slowly and walked over to her, taking her hand and helping her up. "Perhaps you don't know, but Q is really, well, not what he seems. Staying with him means only loneliness. It would be better for you to serve His Majesty alongside me, enjoying His Majesty's favor. That way, at least you won't regret your life." I then looked at Li Sun, my eyes glistening with tears, and said pitifully, "Please, Your Majesty, allow her to enter the palace and accompany me." "Ching Ching, come here." Li Sun motioned for me to approach. When I did, he pulled me into his arms, gently wiping away the tears at the corner of my eye. "Why are you crying? If I promise, then it's settled." "Thank you, Your Majesty." I smiled sweetly, gazing at Li Zhen's ashen face and Lu Ying, who looked about to collapse. Lu Ying's entry into the palace not only ruined Li Zhen's plans, but also served my own hidden purpose. Li Sun's nightly indulgence was truly unbearable. I hoped that Lu Ying could take him away and let me finally get some rest. Sure enough, that very night after the banquet, I heard that Li Sun went to see Lu Ying. I quickly relaxed and took a comfortable bath, changing into fresh clothes. As soon as I lay down, the curtain was pulled back. "I haven't returned yet." "Who told you to sleep?" Li Sun stepped inside. He raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes filled with a chilling smile that made me tremble with fear. "Song Yueqing, who gave you the courage to push me toward another woman?" As he spoke, his hand wrapped around my neck, and he forced me down onto the bed. He leaned over me, his gaze dominating and cold. "If you can't explain, I'll kill you." I was so scared that I couldn't even cry. Trembling, I stammered. It's your majesty who gave it to me. Since I entered the palace, your majesty has favored me, and I thought you cared for me. But I have no talent or virtue, serving you with my beauty. I've always been uneasy, afraid that one day you would grow tired of me and ignore me. So I resorted to this plan, hoping for a little separation to rekindle our love. As I spoke, I cautiously looked at his face. He remained silent, his face cold as water, but his grip loosened, and he began to gently stroke my cheek. I mustered the courage to speak more, tears falling freely. "So, if your majesty doesn't care for me anymore, then I don't want to live. You can kill me if you wish." Ching-ching. Suddenly, he smiled, his expression like a night-blooming flower, his gaze filled with mesmerizing allure. It was something I had never seen on the face of the usually composed Duke Yu. I couldn't help but stare, entranced. "Are you scared?" He patted my head, still smiling. "Be good. Stop crying. Your majesty, you're not angry anymore?" He replied softly, then lowered his head to kiss me. I immediately understood and embraced his waist, acting coquettish as I said, "My heart and eyes only have room for your majesty. Please, show me your mercy." He didn't respond, but his actions became even gentler. I sighed in relief. Finally, I had smoothed things over, and my life was spared. Having been reborn, I didn't want to end up a ghost again so soon. As the sky began to lighten, I heard the eunuch's voice outside the door. "Your Majesty, will you be attending the morning court?"
"No."
Li Sun replied without opening his eyes, pulling me closer into his arms and continuing to sleep. But I was jolted awake, no longer feeling sleepy. Since I entered the palace, I had lost count of how many times Li Sun had skipped court. But in this life, I was determined to cling to him. I couldn't let Li Jun rebel and take the throne. "Your Majesty, wake up, your Majesty." I called out softly a couple of times. He opened his eyes, first groggily, and then the red glow in the corner of his eyes began to spread. "What's wrong? Does Ching Ching still want something?" No. "Then why did you wake me? Was it only the things in bed that mattered between us?" But I could only think that in my heart. I would never say it aloud. "Your Majesty, you should go to the morning court." As expected, the moment those words left my mouth, his eyes turned cold and ominous. "Are you trying to get rid of me again?" "No, your Majesty, you've misunderstood me." I looked up at him with tears in my eyes, burying my head in his chest. "Your Majesty stays with me every night, but if you don't go to the morning court, those ministers might say things about me." He wrapped his arms around my back and patted me gently, answering indifferently, "Who dares to speak out of turn? I'll kill them." I was deeply touched, gazing at him with longing. "But I love you, your Majesty, and I don't want you to get a bad reputation for killing ministers because of me. I want to stay with you, forever and always." He didn't speak for a while, as if pondering the truth of my words. Gradually, a glimmer of light appeared in his dark eyes, and then he released me and got out of bed. "I'm going to the morning court. You all come in and attend to me." Soon, the waiting eunuchs and palace maids filed in. I also forced myself to get up and, with a gentle and virtuous demeanor, began to arrange his hair, tie his robe, and straighten his clothes. As I was doing so, my hand was suddenly grabbed. "You're so familiar with this. Is this how you used to serve Duke Yu?" He asked without any warning, and I was at a loss for words. Fortunately, he didn't press further but merely sneered, turning around to leave. Finally, I managed to send this formidable figure, who made everyone so fearful, out of the room. My legs gave way, and I collapsed back onto the bed, falling into another deep sleep. This sleep felt endless. When I woke up again, a maid came to report, "Your Majesty, Lu Yingying requests to see you. She's been waiting for a long time."
"What does she want?"
I casually waved my hand. Let her in. Lu Yingying entered the room. Although she knelt on the floor, the way she looked at me made it seem as though she were the favored consort and I were just a dancer. Who allowed you to look at the consort like that? Before I could speak, one of the palace maids raised her hand and slapped Lu Yingying across the face. Her delicate, fair face immediately turned red, with a handprint clearly visible, but her gaze was cold and arrogant. What consort? She's nothing but a shameless slut. Dukyu is deeply in love with you, yet you slander and harm him. How dare you? The maid raised her hand again, but I stopped her. I leaned back against the imperial concubine's couch, a faint smile playing at my lips as I looked her up and down. I had spent enough time around Li Sun to learn the art of that inscrutable, unspoken gaze, the kind of calm, distant demeanor he had. Sure enough, after I stared at her for only a short while, Lu Yingying's face began to show signs of panic, her eyes darting away. I raised an eyebrow, smiling with satisfaction. Lu, you say I slander? But Dukyu's affection for me is well known, and I am the only one in his heart. How do you know whether he is capable or not? Could it be that Dukyu's devotion is all just an act, and secretly, he has been having an affair with you? I spoke calmly, but Lu Yingying's face grew progressively paler. By the end of my sentence, she was visibly trembling. You're lying. I am pure with Dukyu. I don't care about your relationship with Dukyu, but if you claim I am spreading false rumors, you must be punished. I want to hit you, but I want you to accept it willingly, I said with an air of calm authority. I waved my hand. Slap her. The sound of a sharp slap echoed through the room. Lu Yingying, the delicate and demure young woman, was quickly slapped into a dazed state and unable to get back up. I watched quietly, the memories of my previous life flooding back. After I died in the past life, for some reason, I didn't reincarnate but remained a wandering soul, staying near Dukyu. I witnessed his ascension to the throne, followed by his marriage to Lu Yingying, and how they shared their most intimate moments. Li Jun, in his deep affection, said, Yingying, you've suffered so much these years. Lu Yingying, with her pitiful expression, responded, Thanks to your Majesty's schemes, that foolish woman died early. Though she was a substitute, my heart ached every day she was by your Majesty's side. Li Jun, full of sympathy, immediately embraced her. Though she is gone, I still have to feign devotion. I am so sorry, Yingying. Lu Yingying smiled triumphantly, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Too bad that foolish woman never knew the truth. I wonder what her expression would have been if she had known before she died. Listening to their conversation, my anger boiled inside me, and I wanted to strike them with all my might, but as a wandering soul, I couldn't do anything. Now, to watch every slap land on Lu Yingying's face, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. What's going on here? A cold voice interrupted my thoughts, and Li Sun entered the room. Everyone in the room immediately knelt, and I hurried to salute him. Instead of helping me up as usual, he looked at Lu Yingying, whose face was now covered in blood and tears, and asked in a deep voice, Why are you hitting her? Before I could explain, Lu Yingying crawled a few steps forward, grabbing the corner of Li Sun's robe. Her face was swollen, unable to speak properly, only letting out soft sobs as she looked at him, full of grievance and pity. Li Sun glanced at me indifferently, then asked again. This morning, he had left the palace not in the best mood, and now, returning from court, seeing me hit someone seemed to make him even angrier. A chill crept up my spine. I hastily tried to explain. Your Majesty, she slandered me, she said. But Li Sun impatiently cut me off. What did she say?
No need to tell me.
I only want to ask, did hitting her make you happy? I hesitated and nodded slightly. Yes. All right, then hit her. He casually gave the order and then turned to walk toward the inner chambers. I was left stunned, and Lu Yingying was still too stunned to react. In the inner chambers, I sat on Li Sun's lap, peeling grapes he had received from the western regions as tribute. Outside, I could hear the sounds of Lu Yingying being beaten. Li Sun frowned. Ching ching, I find it a bit noisy. I was taken aback, then quickly ordered the servants outside to stop and take Lu Yingying away. Who said to let her leave? Li Sun, still holding me, pointed to his chief eunuch. Go and bring the needles used for punishment in the inner court. The kind that hurts but doesn't make noise. The eunuch quickly obeyed. Li Sun tapped my forehead, which was still in a daze. How about this, Ching Ching? Does it make you happy? Yes, happy. Since you're happy, why don't you smile at me? I immediately smiled, resting my head on his shoulder and softly saying, Your Majesty is so kind to me. I'm truly becoming more and more unable to live without you. He snorted but smiled openly. At least you still have a bit of conscience. That day, when Lu Yingying returned from my palace, she was left with barely half her life. Duke Yu was older but of a secondary lineage, and I was originally considered to be Li Sun's sister-in-law. Now, he openly lavished attention on me, while behind the scenes, who knew how many people were gossiping about it. Everyone said that a woman like me, who didn't uphold the proper conduct of a wife, would eventually be discarded by the emperor. But to make me smile, Li Sun allowed the news of his punishment of Lu Yingying to spread, silencing everyone. From then on, when they looked at me, there was only fear in their eyes. If I even smiled casually, it would make them tremble with dread. Soon, the year was coming to an end. Li Sun said he wanted to take me to Tangquan Palace, where the warmth of spring would make it the perfect place to spend the winter. Before we left, he held a family banquet. Lu Yingying, now a consort, had to attend. At the banquet, I noticed Lu Yingying could hardly contain herself, repeatedly glancing at Duke Yu Li Zhen. But Li Zhen, being the man he was, showed no reaction. He simply drank alone, completely ignoring the flirtatious glances Lu Yingying threw at him. Miss Lu. I smiled faintly and called her name. Lu Yingying looked startled, shrinking back as she said, What does the consort wish? Ever since she was punished, she dared not even make eye contact with me, no longer carrying the same arrogance from before. Today is a rare occasion of festivity. Why don't you dance a song to liven things up? Lu Yingying was unwilling, but dared not refuse. She bit her lip, casting a pitiful glance at Li Sun. At this moment, Li Sun was staring down at my waist, idly playing with the ribbon of my robe. He didn't even raise his head when he said, What are you waiting for? Go change your clothes. I obey, Your Majesty. Lu Yingying glanced at Li Zhen beside her, then weakly and delicately walked away. It was cold, and Lu Yingying's dance costume was thin. Her injuries had not fully healed, and it was clear that dancing was a struggle for her. But I turned a blind eye and kept clapping and cheering. I made her dance one song after another. Li Zhen's expression remained unchanged, his hand gripping the wine glass so tightly that his fingers turned white. Finally, the banquet came to an end, and a minister came to report about the arrangements for the trip to Tangquan Palace the following day. Li Sun left for the Hall of Governance, but before leaving, he specifically instructed me to wait for his return and not sleep alone. I touched my delicate neck and nodded hurriedly. On my way back to the palace, I ran into Li Zhen. He was standing alone in the middle of the road, bathed in moonlight, looking like someone not of this world. Yueqing, he called my name gently. May I speak with you privately? Seeing that I didn't respond, he glanced at the eunuchs and maids surrounding me and smiled faintly. If you don't wish, I'll speak plainly. But I'm afraid some things, if spread, will become the subject of gossip. As expected of Li Zhen, he was a man of false piety. If he had contacted me privately, I would have had the guards detain him. But now, he made a public invitation, leaving me in a difficult position. After all, in front of so many people, he couldn't really do anything to me. I adjusted my sleeves and instructed, I will speak with Duke Yu for a moment. You all wait here. Li Zhen led me to a secluded corner. I looked at him coldly and said, This should be quiet enough, now speak. He dropped his nonchalant expression and stared directly at me, his whole demeanor dark and terrifying. Song Yueqing, never torment Yingying again. Oh, Duke Yu, I said with a smirk, it seems you can't keep up the act anymore. I laughed outright. All this talk of unwavering affection for me, but it's just a show for Lu Yingying, isn't it? His eyes darkened, a dangerous glint flashing in them. Song Yueqing, don't forget your father and brother. Their lives are in my hands. If you dare harm Yingying again, don't blame me for being merciless. He didn't need to remind me about my father and brother. But now, I truly didn't care about their lives. I came from a poor family, my mother passed away early, and I was raised by my father and brother. They loved money above all else, even planning to marry me off to an old, 50-year-old magistrate to be his secondary wife. But then I was chosen by Li Zhen to be his consort. My father and brother's eyes nearly popped out when they saw the dowries. After my death in the previous life, they went to Dukyu's residence, wailing and crying. When they received Li Zhen's promise to continue giving them money, their faces immediately lit up with joy. They returned home happily with bags of silver. From then on, they would only remember me when they were short on money, going to Li Zhen to beg. In the previous life, they lived comfortably, benefiting from my death. Whether they lived or died this time, I didn't care. Fine, Dukyu, go ahead and find them. I raised my head and smiled brightly at him. But if my father and brother die today, Lu Yingying will die tomorrow. On the road to the underworld, at least the three of them will have company. In an instant, the killing intent in Li Zhen's eyes flared, and he took 2 steps closer to me. But I wasn't afraid. He had spent years plotting for the throne, and now that the timing wasn't right, he certainly wouldn't do anything to me. I met his cold gaze, my chin raised defiantly. Do you have something else to say, Dukyu? I need to leave now. I still have to save my energy to serve His Majesty. I finished speaking, smiling slyly, and turned to walk away. Back in my palace, I quickly tidied myself up. I sat by the window, waiting for Li Sun to return, but with each passing minute, I grew more anxious. Tonight, I had met with Li Zhen, and he would surely find out quickly. With his unpredictable nature, I didn't know what he might do. Just as I was thinking this, the door opened, and Li Sun walked in. I quietly studied his expression, noticing there was no sign of change. When he walked over to me, he smiled slowly. Qing, were you waiting anxiously? I shuddered inexplicably. For some reason, even when facing the murderous intent of Dukyu earlier, I had felt no fear. But now, looking at Li Sun's smile, my heart started racing uncontrollably. No, not at all. No matter when you return, Your Majesty, I will wait. I leaned into his chest, trying to mask my inner unease. He kissed me while untying my robe. Qing, you're so obedient. I went with Li Sun to Tangquan Palace. The procession was grand and magnificent. When we arrived, I realized that despite the grand display, I was the only consort traveling with him. For some reason, as I looked at the large, empty bathhouse, I couldn't feel happy. Qing, don't you want me to favor only you? Sometimes I really wondered if Li Sun could read minds. How else could he always know exactly what I was thinking? No, I quickly denied. To have His Majesty's exclusive favor, I couldn't want anything more. He smiled, but there was an emotion in his eyes that I couldn't understand. The bath was deep, and I didn't know how to swim, so I clung tightly to Li Sun. Your Majesty, I'm scared. I'm here, don't be afraid. His voice was incredibly gentle, like feathers brushing against the heart. Try letting go. I will protect you. As if bewitched, I nervously climbed off him. But as soon as I did, he released his hold on my waist, and I instantly fell into the water. The warm water engulfed me, and despite my frantic attempts to swim, I sank deeper and deeper. Just when I thought I couldn't breathe anymore, I felt hands pulling me up. Soaked through, I collapsed against Li Sun's shoulder, coughing so violently it felt like my chest would tear. When I finally caught my breath, I couldn't help but burst into tears. Why are you doing this to me, Your Majesty? Doing this? His tone was cold. I'm punishing you. Punishing me? What did I do wrong to deserve your punishment? You tell me. He tilted my chin, pinching it between his fingers, rubbing it back and forth. A mischievous smile curled at the corner of his lips. I was terrified whenever he smiled like that, and my tears flowed more freely. I'm slow-witted. I don't know what I did wrong. Why did you go alone to see Dukyu? I was stunned by the sudden question. It had been half a month since I met Li Zhen after the palace banquet. During this half-month, everything had seemed normal, and he hadn't shown any signs of displeasure. Was this what they meant by the unpredictable will of the emperor? Your Majesty, I met with Dukyu, but do you know what we spoke about? I know. And you still threw me into the water. I was both wronged and angry, coughing again, uncontrollably. My heart only has room for you, Your Majesty, but you never believe me. He stiffened, but then gently patted my back. All right, stop crying. I believe you. But I cried even louder. If you believe me, why are you still punishing me? I'm punishing you because you were threatened. You agreed to speak with him privately. If he threatens you again, just tell me. I'll protect you from now on. Seeing I didn't respond, he asked again, Do you hear me? I hear you. For some reason, my heart began to race. But this time, it wasn't out of fear. Li Sun and I didn't stay at Tangquan Palace for long before news came to the capital. The governor of Jingyao had arrested 2 ruffians who had caused a disturbance on the street and kidnapped village women. But when the 2 ruffians were brought into the magistrate's office, they were unafraid, declaring that they were the father and brother of the emperor's consort, Song Yueqing. Everyone knew that Song Yueqing was currently highly favored. The governor of Jingyao didn't dare take it lightly and wrote up their crimes, including their past misdeeds in the countryside, and sent the report to Tangquan Palace. Li Sun read it, and with a subtle glance at me, his expression remained neutral. I felt uneasy under his gaze, forcing a smile. I come from a humble background and have brought shame upon your Majesty. He said nothing, his voice calm as he asked, Qingqing, what do you think should be done? Naturally, justice must be upheld. Your Majesty cannot overlook the law just because of me. A flash of surprise passed through his eyes, and he smiled faintly. You might not know, but if your father and brother are dealt with according to the law, they'll be exiled. Exiled? I actually let out a sigh of relief. Exile was fine, far better than being used by Dukyu. They don't understand the dangers of the court, and being far from this place of intrigue may be a blessing. I said this offhandedly, but to my surprise, he suddenly turned to me with a darkened gaze. His eyes were cold, as though deep in thought. Why are you looking at me like that, Your Majesty? Nothing. He stood up, rubbed my head gently, and instructed the eunuchs in the room. Prepare the carriage. We're returning to the capital. When we returned to the capital, I learned just how much trouble my father and brother had caused. As the carriage entered the city, the streets were crowded with citizens, their voices impossible to silence. The one in the carriage is that favored consort. I heard she was the emperor's sister-in-law before. Truly shameless. One person rises, and their whole family benefits. She climbs into the dragon bed, and now lets her family run amok. Exactly, but since she's favored, she can do whatever she wants, even bullying men and oppressing the villagers, and nothing happens. I sat in the carriage, silently listening. It wasn't so much sadness, but thinking about how poor my reputation was made me feel uncomfortable. Don't mind them. Li Sun spoke calmly beside me. Since I ascended the throne, I've been the subject of much gossip. The people are ignorant, and they're easily swayed by others. If anyone had a calm mindset, it was Li Sun. But the things they said about him were all about his licentiousness. Actually, it didn't seem too wrong. But how could I say that? I could only hold his hand gratefully. You're the only one who treats me well. When we arrived at the palace and entered court, the accusations against me were even fiercer. The ministers claimed that I had bewitched the emperor, ruined the country, and asked Li Sun to depose me. For all the petitions, Li Sun remained unmoved as usual, and I had no idea what he was truly thinking. I felt uneasy, but didn't dare to ask. That night, unable to sleep, I lay staring at the dark ceiling. Li Sun must have woken up at some point, as he turned and pressed over me. Since you're not sleeping, let's do it again. I quickly shut my eyes. I'm sleeping, I'm sleeping. But he kissed me. I'm already awake. Who told you to sleep? A month passed in the blink of an eye, and just as the court was in an uproar, Li Sun issued an imperial decree. It was a reversal of an old rebellion case. This case was from the reign of the late emperor, where the minister of war, Chen Ju, was accused of secretly collaborating with the princes, intending to rebel. The late emperor was furious and immediately sentenced the male members of the Qin family to execution, while the women were sent to the brothel registry. After the late emperor's death, there were occasional calls for the Qin family to be vindicated and for the case to be reopened. But Li Sun had never paid much attention to it, casually dismissing the memorials when they reached him. No one expected that at this moment, he would suddenly overturn the case and search for the surviving members of the Qin family. All the male members of the Qin family had died, leaving behind only one orphan daughter. And that daughter was me. I was completely stunned. When one of Qin family's old servants came into the palace and saw me, he cried out loudly, calling Miss. I was left utterly confused. My father and brother had been so indifferent to me. Was I really not their biological child? That night, I went to ask Li Sun. He smiled as he looked at me, as if I were the biggest fool. I gave you an identity to deceive the world, and now you've taken it seriously? Okay, I sighed. I was still the same person I always was. Through the Qin family case, Li Sun also disposed of a few court officials. Afterward, the public opinion about me in the court completely flipped. No one called me the emperor's sister-in-law anymore, nor did anyone label me as a beauty who brought disaster. From the court to the common people, everyone now believed I was the daughter of a loyal and honorable family, fit to be the empress. Li Sun, following the will of the people, issued a decree to officially crown me as the empress. When I received the decree, I was completely dazed. The eunuch kindly reminded me, "Your Majesty, you should express your gratitude and thank the emperor." I dumbly accepted the decree and thanked him, feeling as though I were in a dream. Li Sun had many women in his palace, but they were all of lower rank, beautiful, but of lower status. And now, I had suddenly risen to the position of empress. Even with 2 lifetimes, I never could have imagined this. When Li Sun returned, I was still in a daze. He looked at me with a dark expression. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy to be married to me?" "I am happy, Your Majesty." "I'm so happy. I've gone completely foolish." I hurriedly poured tea and handed it to him, smiling extra sweetly. Why has the public opinion shifted so quickly? Not long ago, they were calling for my death. Public opinion is always manipulated. The criticisms against you were fueled by others behind the scenes. I've dealt with their dogs, and now no more storms will stir. Still a bit dazed, I asked, "Who is the mastermind behind this?" He looked at me, his expression a mix of amusement and mockery, and spoke slowly, word by word. "Your dear husband, Duke Yu." Ugh, ugh, ugh. I made a face, then wrapped my arms around his neck. "I'm going to be empress now, and you, Your Majesty, are my husband." His eyes sparkled at my words, and the small mole at the corner of his eye reddened again. I quickly seized the opportunity. "Your Majesty, I think Duke Yu has ambitions. It would be better to kill him sooner rather than later." He lifted me up effortlessly, carrying me towards the inner palace with light steps. "Wait a little longer. It's not yet time to net him." The preparations for my coronation as empress were proceeding in an orderly fashion. During this time, I felt more glorious and content than ever before. However, there had been recent reports of unrest at the borders. Li Sun rarely took things seriously, but for several consecutive nights, he stayed at the Hall of Governance. I, on the other hand, enjoyed the peace and quiet. That evening, as usual, I was reading a storybook under the light, but for some reason, I began to feel increasingly drowsy. Sensing something was off, I called for my personal maid to fetch the imperial doctor. But she smiled at me in a strange way, her expression a bit eerie. "Your Majesty, you should go to sleep now." Before long, I fell into a deep, uneasy slumber. When I opened my eyes again, My body swayed unsteadily. I found myself in a fast-moving carriage. The person sitting beside me wore white clothing, delicate and fragile. It was Lu Yingying. "You wretched woman, you're finally awake." I rubbed my head and sat up. "Where is this?" She looked at me with an expression of indescribable pride and satisfaction. "Song Yueqing, you didn't expect this, did you? The maid who's been by your side all along was actually my loyal servant. All the times she beat me, she was just acting to gain your trust. You wretched woman, first you tormented me, then you impersonated my identity and became the empress. I will make you pay for all of it." Impersonating my identity? A shock ran through me, and I asked, "Was your original surname Qin?" "Yes, my father was Qinju, the Minister of War. I am the true daughter of the Qin family. For these years, I have been living in the Imperial Music Bureau, fortunate enough to be protected by Duke Yu, which saved my life. The maid who grew up with me, however, entered the palace as a palace maid and was assigned to your palace. From the moment I saw her in your palace, I began to plan. So that's what happened." Lu Yingying had carefully set up a pawn right under my nose, one that I had never noticed. I leaned forward and looked outside the carriage, then asked, "Where are you taking me?" She scoffed coldly, a surge of hatred filling her eyes. "The army that supports Duke Yu is almost here. Naturally, we're taking you to the army to be killed and used as a flag to rally their cause. Song Yueqing, your time is up." I heard her words, but instead of feeling scared, I smiled. "I don't know when I will die, but you're the one who is about to die." With that, I lunged at her, grabbing her by the throat. "Let go." Lu Yingying struggled, but she was weak, and it didn't take long for me to overpower her. The driver of the carriage, hearing the commotion, rushed in. That was the moment I had been waiting for. I swiftly grabbed the whip he had left behind and used all my strength to lash it at the horse. "Song Yueqing, are you crazy?" In the midst of Lu Yingying's shrill scream, the horse, startled, bolted wildly. The driver shoved me aside and grabbed the whip, desperately trying to control the panicked horse. The carriage bounced violently, eventually crashing into a tree. The horse's leg broke, and it collapsed to the ground. The driver was thrown from the carriage, his head hitting a stone, knocking him unconscious. Lu Yingying crawled out of the wreckage, her face full of fear, and she immediately tried to run.
Yingying.
A clear voice rang out, and Li Jun appeared, riding a horse from a distance. "I was ahead, heard the crash, and came back in case you were in danger. Are you hurt?" Duke Yu. Lu Yingying, seeing him as if he were her savior, ran into his arms, pointing at me and crying out, "Song Yueqing has gone mad and ruined the carriage. Now, you're the only one left with the horse. Quickly kill her and take me." Lu Yingying's voice suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened in shock, staring at Li Jun with disbelief. A short knife was embedded in her chest. The hilt was gripped by Li Jun's hand. "Yingying," Li Jun's voice remained as gentle and melodious as ever. "You know, there is only one horse, and with Li Sun's pursuers close behind, I can only take one person. But I must take Song Yueqing. Instead of leaving you to be humiliated by the pursuers, this is a better way to release you. Don't blame me, Yingying." Li Jun finished speaking, releasing his grip, and Lu Yingying collapsed softly to the ground. But she didn't die immediately. She stared at Li Jun, her eyes filled with confusion and unwillingness. I remembered how, in the previous life, she had mocked me for being foolish and died without knowing the truth. Now, the situation had reversed, and I would at least let her die with some understanding. I walked over, crouched down beside her, and whispered, "Lu Yingying, after all these years, don't you still understand? For Li Jun, the most important things are always power and benefit. I am now the officially recognized daughter of the Qin family, the orphan of loyal officials. Li Jun is plotting rebellion and wants to use me as a cover. If worst comes to worst, if the emperor leads an army here, he can use me as leverage. At this very moment, I am more useful to Li Jun than you are. That's why he can only take me." After I finished speaking, Lu Yingying's face showed a look of sudden realization. All the unwillingness and resentment in her eyes faded into dullness. In truth, there was something else I hadn't said. In the previous life, he had killed me for the throne. This time, he would just as easily kill you. Li Zhen watched as Lu Yingying's eyes closed and then turned to look at me, his gaze cold and menacing. Song Yueqing, you're clever enough. I do have some use for you. Once my plan is completed, I'll make you beg for death. I was taken to the military camp by Li Zhen. He locked me in a military tent and went out on his own. He didn't return until late at night. Under the dim candlelight, he looked at me coldly, advancing step by step like a ghost. I felt uneasy and fearful. I turned to run, but he grabbed me in an instant. You wretched woman! You dared to slander me before. Tonight, I will make you suffer. Saying that, he roughly tore my clothes off. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with hatred that seemed as though it could pierce me. Don't worry, after I'm done enjoying myself, I'll let the whole army reward themselves with you. Everyone will get to trample on you, the slut. His strength was overwhelming, and I couldn't break free. At that moment, I was stripped of my jewelry, and I realized I had no means to take my own life. Li Zhen pinned me down, gritting his teeth, his neck bulging with veins. I blinked and remembered that in my previous life, I had driven a hairpin into this very spot. Blood spurted out, and I died instantly. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck me. Without hesitation, I lifted my head and bit down on Li Zhen's neck with all my strength. He screamed in pain and began to hit me. Punch after punch landed on my head and body. But my mind was focused on one thing. I would die today, but I would make sure he paid for it. No matter how hard he hit me, I didn't let go. Under his brutal blows, my consciousness began to fade. Just as I felt like I was about to die, Li Zhen suddenly stopped. His eyes widened in shock, and he collapsed to the ground. Then someone pulled me into their arms. Ching ching, ching ching. Was it Li Sun? I was covered in blood, unable to tell if it was mine or Li Zhen's. But I still managed to force a smile and called out weakly, Your Majesty. And then everything went black. In a daze, I felt pain all over my body. I couldn't help but cry out, It hurts. It hurts so much. Soon, a cold voice responded, Be gentle. If she cries out in pain again, I'll have your heads chopped off. Then the voice softened, Ching ching, I'm here. Don't cry. When I finally woke from the darkness, I found myself back on the familiar dragon bed. Li Sun was lying next to me. His face was paler than usual, with stubble on his chin. Your Majesty, ow. As soon as I spoke, I felt a sharp pain in my face. Awake. Li Sun quickly opened his eyes, his gaze full of light, staring at me intently. I touched my head and remembered that after being beaten by Li Zhen, I must have a swollen face, looking terribly ugly. I pushed him gently. Your Majesty, don't look at me. I'm so ugly. Ugly? What's ugly? His long fingers gently brushed over my eyebrows, nose, and cheek. If you were ugly, I wouldn't have called you into the palace. He really didn't hide his lustful nature. I wanted to laugh but was afraid of the pain, so I forced myself to hold it in. After a while, I asked, What about Dukyu? What Dukyu? I've already deposed him as a commoner and sent him off with a cup of poisoned wine. That's good. My heart settled. Li Zhen was finally dead. Ching ching, I said I would protect you, but I failed. Li Sun gently pulled me into his embrace, his voice muffled. I had long suspected Li Zhen's treacherous intentions, but I allowed him to carry on, hoping to draw out all his forces from the provinces and then eliminate them in one go. I thought everything was under control, but the disaster came from within, with an unnoticed maid causing you harm. Though you're foolish, it's not your fault. Let Li Zhen do whatever he wanted for now. Just pretend to go along with him until I come to rescue you. I remembered the image of Li Zhen from that day, like a ghost, and shivered, saying in a trembling voice. But Li Zhen said he was going to throw me into the army to be humiliated. I would rather die. Then you have to live. The person holding me patted my back. No matter what, you have to stay alive and wait for me. But even if I wait for your majesty, I'm all ready. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I love you. Your majesty, what did you say? I was startled and quickly asked. But he refused to answer, pressing my head into his chest. It's too late. Sleep now. But after hearing his words, how could I sleep? My heart was racing with countless thoughts, unsure whether it was sweetness or bitterness, happiness or embarrassment. After a long time, a voice came from above. Was it because you loved Dukyu before, fearing to lose your virginity, that you tried to kill yourself? What? I was taken aback, my eyes wide with shock as I stared at Lee Sun. His expression was somewhat confused, and he furrowed his brow, saying slowly, I always have the same dream. I dream of the night I summoned you to the palace. As soon as you saw me, you immediately drove a hairpin into your throat, and blood poured everywhere. Then I woke up in fear. Your Majesty, I smiled faintly, lifted his thin chin, and kissed his lips. That was just a dream. I'll stay with you for life, never depart. Lee Sun smiled again, his eyes glowing as brightly as the stars in the sky. End of the story.